Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. I can see you all signing in. Welcome, welcome. We'll give it a few minutes just to make sure everyone is on. Hello, everyone. I can see you signing in. Welcome. Welcome to our webinar today. Hello, hello. All right. Thank you. As you guys sign in, I'm going to introduce myself and our speaker and do a little housekeeping. Hello, my name is Joy McFarland. I am the Product Marketing Manager for the US and Canada here at National Geographic Learning. Thank you for joining us today. We know you're all busy and zoomed out, so we appreciate you joining us. We would like to give you some tips today on how to make this new normal work even better and be even more engaging. So just before I introduce our speaker, I did want to do a little bit of housekeeping, just a couple of things. This webinar is being recorded and you will be receiving a certificate that will come via email in about 5 to 6 business days. Thank you for your patience on that. Any questions, please feel free to pop them right in the chat and introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you're teaching, what you're teaching, and any questions we will try to get right to you as soon as we can. And Jacob will take some questions at the end of the webinar as well. So let me introduce Jacob, our speaker. Jacob Skelton is an assistant professor of English as a second language and chair of the Department of Global Languages and Society at Los Angeles Mission College in California. Jacob holds an MA in linguistics, has over 15 years of experience in the field of TESOL, and has taught at the community college level for more than 10 years. In addition to teaching, Jacob specializes in educational technology, and he has given numerous presentations on how to incorporate learning management systems such as Canvas, Blackboard, or Desire to Learn into ESL courses at conferences like TESOL and all over the United States. So thank you, Jacob, for your time today. I will hand it over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Joy. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thanks for having me. And thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. Give me a second to get my notes going here. Gosh, I'm looking at the participants list and we have people from all over the world coming today. That's really awesome. Folks from Europe, Asia, people from my old college of Broward College, South Florida. I saw someone from Miami-Dade College. Really great to see everyone here today. I want to take a moment to thank also National Geographic Learning for the opportunity, as well as Andrew O'Shea for giving me the opportunity to present today. And of course, my own sales rep, Stephen Maggiore. Thanks again for the chance to present to all of you today. So I'm sharing my screen right now. I hope you all can see the webpage that I've put together for the presentation today. The presentation title is Integrating Online Resources into Your Remote ESL Classroom. So just like Joy said, you know, we're kind of used to Zoom by now. We've been doing this hopefully for a few months. Can't imagine anyone's totally new to Zoom, but we have been teaching remotely for some time. So how do we take it to the next level? That's sort of the purpose of this workshop today. A little bit more about me. Like Joy mentioned, I'm a professor at Los Angeles Mission College in Los Angeles. It's one of the 9 colleges in the LA Community College District. I also have a background in educational technology, so about 15 years in the field of TESOL and about 5 years in with experience in ed tech. I've worked with colleagues in the past on their own course instructional design projects back at Broward College and projects here at Mission College. I've also worked across the district here at LA Mission, an open educational resource project with the State Academic Senate. We did a course together with colleagues across the LACCD. And I'm most proud of the recent project, Pathways on Canvas, which is the project I did with National Geographic Learning Cengage. You are probably familiar with the Pathways series, and we released in around January, February, several Canvas shells that go along with the books. And the timing couldn't have been better. Of course, the plans for that project came before COVID, but if there's anything fortunate about COVID, those Pathways shells may have come in handy for some of you guys during this time. So this presentation really is taking us further. It's not really a how-to, I'm not here to demonstrate sort of step by step what to do, but really instead what you can do, sort of the potential of some of the cool tools out there. And just to note that all skills are welcome. So if you're new to educational technology, instructional design, that's okay. If you're an expert and just want to learn a few more tips, you've come to the right place. Let me take a moment to talk a little bit about Zoom etiquette. Joy is going to help me with the Q&A portion. So if you have questions, we have both the Q&A box. You can put the questions there. You can also use the chat box, and Joy is going to keep watch of that and get back to you guys with answers. If it's something relevant to the presentation, I'll address it at the end of the presentation if we can. But if it's urgent, Joy, I don't mind if you interrupt me if we want to get to a critical point.
Sounds good.
We'll keep the mics muted in general. I don't think we have our hand raising tool. We might have the hand raising tool, but if you have access to that hand raising tool in Zoom, feel free to use it, especially towards the end when we're doing the Q&A. So let's talk a little bit about our outcomes for today. 4 things I hope you take away from this. Let me zoom in a little bit, make this a little bit clearer. I hope you take away some tips to organize your online course well, and how you can integrate ready-made Canvas content effectively. So whether it be those pathways on Canvas shells that we made, or perhaps the shells from the Standout series that are newly released, how do you integrate content that you've gotten from someone else and put it into your own shell effectively? I hope you also take time to try some of the online tools I'll feature today, particularly Flipgrid, which is a fun video engagement tool that you can embed into Canvas. Also, we'll be using Google Jamboards today. Google Jamboards are a fun way to engage students in class. You can do this in a breakout room or as a large group. And you'll also notice today I'm using Google Sites. So my visual aid today is not a PowerPoint. Instead, I put together this Google site, which actually will now serve as a resource for you. In fact, let me go ahead and copy the link and post this into the box here for you. So you can click on that link and go right to this Google site page, and feel free to toggle, move around, click, play around. You're not going to break anything, and follow along with me. If you're not into the multitasking, then by all means, just sit back and watch the webinar, and everything I'm doing in the screen share, you can just follow along. Toward the end of the presentation, we'll dive deeper into Zoom and talk a little bit about some of those tools. So here's our agenda. These links are live links to get you to the different pages here on the site and the 3 different main portions. I decided to use phrasal verbs as a way to organize my presentation for those ESL folks in the crowd. So we have 3 main areas. The first is I'm going to break it down for you. So again, breakdown simply means to organize your content well. I'm going to show you how to break things up, how to mix up the routine, how to use online apps like Flipgrid and these Google Jamboards to kind of break it up, mix things up. And then we're going to break out, we probably won't actually have the opportunity to do a Zoom breakout room, but I will introduce the feature, and you can dive deeper into your own training and how to use those. But we will launch a Zoom poll toward the end, which is another great way to engage your students. Before I get to the first part of the presentation, breakdown, I want to point to these additional resources. I mentioned earlier the Pathways on Canvas project. We did webinars for those earlier in the summer, so I've linked here to one of those webinars. You can find that if you want to learn more about that project, it's there for you. We'll also be touring a Canvas demo course that I set up for today's presentation. And I've made it so that you can self-enroll into that Canvas course. And to do that, you're just going to click here, Canvas course student view. When you click that, it'll take you on through to the self-enrollment feature. I've already enrolled myself, but you'll get something similar that says self-enroll or go to the course. This is using the free version of Canvas, canvas.instructure.com. If you have an account, just log in and you'll self-enroll into the demo shell today. If you don't have an account, you may want to take a moment to set one up, or like I said, you can always come back and do this later. Again, this demo shell is a resource for you to check out and to sort of model your own design after. So while you're checking out the Google site and possibly self-enrolling into the Canvas demo course, let's break it down in the first segment of the presentation. So by break it down, what I mean is to organize our content well. And I want to touch on a little bit of instructional design, some of the principles of educational technology and instructional design. If you aren't familiar with this field, that's okay. One of the basic models for instructional design is something called ADDIE. And ADDIE stands for Analysis, Design, Development, Implementation, and Evaluation. So you'll notice that in this particular model that I'm showing, evaluation is at the center of the design process. And I think that's important to note because as you go through each stage of development, we want to constantly go back and evaluate, make sure we check in and kind of reflect on what's happening. In that sense, it's an iterative process. It's also iterative in that we repeat this process as we design and implement. This model promotes revision, revising and editing, and again, thoughtful reflection. And I think it helps us boil things down to the essence. It helps us get to what I think is the key to instructional design, and that is less is more. Less is more. Now, when I say less is more, don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean less content. That doesn't mean less quality or less rigor. Less is more really refers to less stimulus, less distraction, less what's called cognitive overload. Now we know our students, English language learners, they already have a lot of input coming in, a lot of things to decipher. And by conducting our classes fully online for the most part, we're adding to that sort of cognitive overload. And we can help cut down on that and reduce electronic barriers by organizing our content very well. Let me scroll down and explain ADDIE in a little bit more detail. This second picture sort of shows the model at work. We begin with analysis, which is kind of like our brainstorming. We note what objectives we're trying to achieve. We define what success looks like and maybe start sketching out some metrics for success. Then we continue the brainstorm with what our design will look like, perhaps on paper. What sort of content do we need? What ideas are we going to tackle? What format will we be using? I'll talk in a moment about sort of the workflow that we may choose from, the different types of workflow. Then we start developing our model. And as we develop, we're creating a pilot, we're reviewing the materials, and we're creating a prototype. Then we implement what we've created. And at this point, remember, we've gone through a process of evaluation. So we don't want to get stuck on any particular stage here. So when we implement, we're ready and we're confident that what we do will have the intended effect. But we're not really sure if it has that intended effect or not until we evaluate, right? So after we implement, we sort of collect data and we go back and look, did we achieve our objective? Did the students like what they saw? Did any behavior change? Did we achieve the outcomes that we set out for? And then again, we go back to the analysis part. It's iterative, so we repeat the process. And when we analyze, we uncover issues, shortfalls, and areas of improvement. So again, ADDIE really helps us keep things simple and help us organize our content well. I mentioned the two different patterns of organization, what I call types of workflow. And these are just very generic basic types. You don't have to pick one or the other. In fact, I think a combination could work well. The most common in an asynchronous course is the sequential week by week format that you likely would see in a traditional DE or distance education course. Each week is clearly labeled and the students work through one by one. Works well again for an asynchronous type of course. Asynchronous meaning you're not meeting one-on-one with the instructor all the time. Another type of workflow would be the nonlinear, sort of more modular topic-based design, where the students have a variety of modules they can open, but they don't necessarily have to move through them sequentially. It really depends on the course you're teaching. And again, going back to ADDIE, that analysis part of the process, we want to reflect and think, what are my course requirements? How can I organize these requirements? How can I organize the content in a way that makes sense to students? And then how can I get them to flow through that content in a way that doesn't confuse them and leave them sort of lost? So as we're designing with intention. We're designing, again, with a focus, with our outcomes in mind. We are using technology for a purpose. So I'll show you some tools today. Flipgrid, for example, Google Jamboards, all fun things. I'm sure you've found many others as you're doing training for this remote environment. But we also want to keep in mind that technology should have a purpose in class. The class I'll be demonstrating today is a listening and speaking class where we do class presentations. And Flipgrid lends itself well to this type of environment. I don't just want to use Flipgrid because it's new and neat. I want to use it to achieve one of the outcomes and the goals of the course. I also want to stay consistent with the approach. So as I design, I want to make sure that that design is similar. And if there are major changes, I note those changes to students, that I design with the student in mind. Keep in mind our students use a variety of devices to access our content. Many of them, unfortunately, many of them use cell phones. They just don't have access to a laptop or a tablet. So we have to keep in mind how they view our content and get feedback from them and take that feedback to heart. And remember, again, it's an iterative process, so it's important that we go back and repeat and keep in mind less is more. So at this time, perhaps you've had a chance to link into that self-enrollment page. Let me copy this link and see if I can share it into the box. Not sure if that will go through to you. Perhaps it will. If you can get to that, awesome. I'll share again the Google site, which will take you directly to this page. And so take a moment, if you haven't already, to link into the Canvas demo shell, and I'll do that now myself. This is optional. If you don't feel like multitasking, like I said, just pay attention to the screen share and follow along. I'm going to immediately skip to student view to show you what the course will look like from the student perspective. Again, it's important that we design with the student in mind, so that's how we'll take a look at this particular page. So first, you'll notice that we land at this home page that I created, and this home page changes week by week. So the course would start off with a welcome page, perhaps with a video that I've posted, welcoming the students to the course, and links, of course, to the syllabus and course schedule. But as the semester progresses, I really want to just keep their focus. And once they get used to this design, knowing that they know sort of where they're going, I want to direct their attention to the important things each week so that they stay on task. I have my Start Here button at the top. And like I said, students may already know this pattern of organization. They know that they can find the information deep in the module, so they want to probably just click through and move on. But for those who just want to do a quick checklist of what they need to do each week, they have this little list that I've created, including the important objectives for week 5, for example. And it also, Canvas also creates a to-do list automatically so that you can see all of the different activities populated. That to-do list is created once you put dates and other parameters on each activity, something that you can do relatively easy yourself through the edit mode. I've also linked to my ELT. So this is a place where the students can link and go to their lab work. My ELT is a fantastic resource for you to add on to your courses. And because it's not yet embedded into the Canvas platform, a workaround is simply to add a link. And all I did was I posted an image of the MyELT logo and put a hot link behind that. And I sort of just keep ongoing information for students about coronavirus and where they can get help during this process. So the point is we have a very clean homepage, and also we have a very clean navigation menu. You'll notice if I leave student view and I go to the instructor view, so now what you're looking at, you're seeing the build mode or the instructor mode. You'll see all those tools on the left, and you can see that I've hidden the vast majority of them. This is very, very helpful. It helps us to, again, keep less is more. It helps to limit distraction and really just focus the students' attention on exactly what we want them to see. All the tools that they need, quizzes, discussions, assignments, those are all embedded in the modules that I've created. So another important tip to keep in mind. Let me click through into the modules themselves. So you'll notice I'm featuring a lot of the content from the Pathways on Canvas project. And I'll show you in a moment the difference between sort of that ready-made shell that we created and how I integrate that content into my own shell. But I want to also point out, in addition to having a slimmed down navigation menu, I only have a few, maybe I can collapse all of them. I only have a few modules open right now. I recommend no more than 3 or 4. Right now I have the weekly module, and each week I'll just highlight that particular module, week 6 next week, 7, etc., 8, and hide the ones that we've completed. Now, if of course students need access, maybe they're absent, can always make those accessible. But the point is we really want to cut down on the amount of information for them to process. I have a module for class projects. So right now they're on class project 3. So I only will highlight the class projects that they're working on. They always have access to the previous work through grades, and they can always see how they did by going there. I've opened the final class project module. It's not due till November, but this gives the students time to kind of go in, prepare and make it a quality project. And then I've kept that My ELT link at the very bottom for them to access. Now, before we go through the module itself, the weekly module, I want to just take a moment to kind of compare the module I created with the Pathways on Canvas ready-made content to the actual Pathways on Canvas modules themselves. So I just clicked over to another Canvas shell, and what you're looking at here is the Pathways ready-made Canvas shell that we created for instructors to use. Now, once you adopt the book, this is available to you. So again, this presentation isn't necessarily to feature this project, but to show you simply that there's a difference in how we design this. So the ready-made shells are meant to be sort of supplemental shells, like a homework or lab work activity. But these were designed pre-COVID, keep in mind. Now we're living in this world where your Canvas shell, your Blackboard shell, your D2L shell is your classroom. So we want to cut out some of the things that maybe are there for design and only focus on the important content. So kind of going back to the class I created, you'll see that I cut out that fancy homepage, right? And I opted instead for one that's more informative to my students. So rather than having this fancy table of contents in the ready-made shell where I can click through, instead I have a direct link to the modules where students get right to work, right? This is what I'm talking about, integrating the content effectively and doing it with the students in mind. So I'm going to pause now and leave student view. And I want to take now time for us to look at how this course looks from the instructor's standpoint. So I left student view. Now notice again, I'm back in the remote Canvas shell, the remote shell I set up for this webinar. And I know I'm in instructor mode because you can see again those tools on the left side that I've hidden from the student. As I scroll down, you'll see that I have older modules here, modules that we've passed. So it's just as simple as publishing and unpublishing previous modules. So if you're done with week 4, unpublish it in bulk. That way it cuts down information for students to see. Before I go on to the next part, I want to make sure I'm checking the chat box. Looks like we don't have any questions. And Joy, please let me know if any urgent questions come up.
Jacob, we have a couple.
Oh, okay. So let me pause for a moment.
Lucy says she loves Flipgrid, but only half of her adult ed students could figure out how to log in, and it was a nightmare. Awesome. Did she, and she had to drop it for the term just because it wasn't working out. Do you have any suggestions for getting them past whatever that part is?
I love that question. In fact, so we'll get to Flipgrid in just a minute. So give me about 10 minutes and I'll dive deeper into Flipgrid.
Awesome.
But yeah, so I think the key there real quick is scaffolding. And so we'll talk about how we scaffold up to the high stakes activities.
Okay, and one more from Dan asking, are any of these tools compatible with non-Google platforms?
I missed that last part with
Google platforms, non-Google platforms.
Absolutely. So you notice that I'm using Canvas, which is a learning management system. It's very similar to Blackboard or Desire to Learn. Those are the market leaders at this time in the learning management system world. And all of these things are separate from Google tools. Google itself makes its own learning management system called Google Classrooms. There's a whole variety of Google tools that are compatible with all the learning management systems on the market today. So that's one of the cool things to keep in mind. All these things can be kind of linked together in this manner.
Thanks.
You can spend a whole webinar on Google tools, but let me move on. Was there another question?
No, at the moment,
Okay.
unless Roger is asking, is there an online book students use with your course, or do they work with a paper
Great
book?
question. Yeah, so actually, let me toggle over. Thanks, if that was Roger. Thanks so much, because I meant to talk about this earlier. I actually do use the ebook in the remote environment. The ebook is just as good as the paper book, but of course, actually, I think it's better because it has all the lovely hot links in it. For example, if you're doing the warm-up activity, the vocabulary activity, which has exercises, of course, in the book for students to do. It has all the audio built in. It's very similar to the classroom presentation tool, which is a flash drive, also available, and something you could feature through Zoom by screen sharing. Awesome ways to augment and modify and add to your remote learning platform. And by having the content ready-made, the Canvas content already ready-made, you're supplementing that ebook very well. So essentially, we would be going through these activities in class. Either the student has the paper book or the ebook, either way, whatever's cheaper, I would suggest. I hate to say that, but in today's world, that is a consideration. But either way, I'm demonstrating through the screen share what the students can see in the book. And then we take them over back to Canvas, where they do additional work, homework exercises. So like, for example, that listen and repeat activity I was just showing you. So here's the vocabulary for lesson A. We do the book work, we kind of get to know the words, and then we come back and do the additional supplemental listen and repeat activity, perhaps for homework, or even beforehand. Perhaps this is a warm-up activity leading them into the class that week. So great questions. I want to show you one more thing before I get to a quiz that I created for this class. What helps make things clear to students is by having a weekly plan. So what I did is at the beginning of each module, again, this is the idea of having consistency. So each week consistently, I have a page that's called week number, week 5 in this case, plan and homework. So the students know, in addition to that home page that they land on, which has sort of a boiled down version of this, they can find the more detailed version here, and it's all linked pretty clearly. And also, I start my class every day with this information, so they know what to do and there aren't any questions. I organize it by day and also show them the classwork as well as homework for each day. I want to feature the quiz here because in the Pathways on Canvas shell, it does not feature currently the exam view quizzes. I know some faculty use those exam view quizzes and they're awesome. So just so you know, there is a way for you to take those pre-made quizzes, the assessments in exam view, and import them into Canvas, Blackboard, Desire to Learn. I don't want to say easily, there are some steps, but with some practice, relatively easily. So you can see here at the bottom, I created a quiz for today to show you. And when this quiz, of course, is in Canvas, so it's sort of the result of this process I'll share with you. And it simply features those ready-made questions from ExamView, and I just organize them here in the Canvas shell. It's a vocabulary review, so the students are going through the vocabulary activities from lesson A and B from this unit. And at the very end, it has a speaking activity, which the students can do directly in Canvas. And I've simply added and modified the directions so that they're using the recording function here in Canvas, which looks like this. I may not be able to use it now because I'm recording here in Zoom, so I can't do 2 at a time, but you get the idea that it is possible to use. So going back to the person who mentioned Flipgrid, Canvas does have recording capabilities. We don't even really need Flipgrid. This tool will work just fine by clicking Record, Upload Media. You have access to that. But in a moment, I'll show you how Flipgrid can kind of make things fun. Let me just leave student view for a moment and show you when we export a quiz from ExamView and we import it into Canvas, it shows up under your quiz test bank. This is something that gets lost on some instructors. So if you're a heavy Canvas user, you probably know that your test bank is sort of hidden behind the quiz tool. But if you're relatively new to Canvas, maybe you're doing some training, you are familiar with the quiz tool, keep in mind next to the quiz tool, that little dot there is where you'll find your question bank. And that's where you'll notice that that question bank was uploaded. So I actually did create a PowerPoint on how to export a test from ExamView and import it into Canvas. I don't have time to share it with you today, but I will link it to that Google site, and I'll share it with Joy to share with any participants. So if you have questions on how to do that, you have a step-by-step review on how. So I want to pause again for any other questions, because we're about to transition now to the next part. So going back to the agenda, break it down. I just showed you how to break down your Canvas module, your course modules well. I also showed you how you can integrate things like the ready-made Canvas content from Pathways on Canvas or even the Standout into your own shell. Before we move on to the next one, break up, any other questions real quick?
Jacob, you have one question from Stephanie. If you hide the finished weeks, how do students refer to them later when they need the information? Or can they?
Yeah, excellent question. So this is one way to sort of keep students on task. Once they get used to the fact that you will be hiding things, they'll stay on task. They will be more likely to stay on task, I should say. But inevitably, students will fall behind. If it's an asynchronous class, we kind of give them that flexibility. So it's understandable if they do fall behind. It is relatively easy to simply unhide modules. It's also possible to give students access to, say, a quiz that they missed. So rather than opening the entire module again, maybe we just give them access to a discussion or a quiz or one of the activities in the module. I can work with Stephanie later on how to do that. Remember, Canvas Commons has really cool webinars and demos on sort of how-to steps. So how you can designate a particular activity to one specific student is something you can definitely find in the Canvas community pages online. Great question. And I want to stay on top of our agenda here. So as I move forward, feel free to put other questions in the Q&A box and we'll get to them soon. So we just talked about how to break it down. Now, how do we break things up? How do we break up the routine so that students don't get bored with all this consistency that we're building? I mentioned Flipgrid. Certainly that point about Flipgrid being challenging, maybe a little bit difficult for students to use at first, I agree. So let me talk about how I integrate it. First, as instructors, we need to know how to use it. So the first thing is you have to integrate Flipgrid as a tool into Canvas. It doesn't automatically come built in. Maybe your district has purchased it for your college. Mine hasn't. So in order for me to use it, as well as many other instructors, we have to do the integration ourselves. So there's just a couple steps. Again, it's relatively easy if you follow the steps. And that's what this link and video will provide. It'll show you how to integrate it directly into Canvas. Again, I won't spend time on how to do that. You can go back and use this resource at any time. There's also a link here called Step-by-Step Guide to Integrate Flipgrid. This is a PDF that the folks at Flipgrid made to help you integrate. This is something shareable. It's got a lot of great screenshots. So before you get going, study this and do the work to kind of help you integrate the tool before you launch it. There are videos. So if you want to learn more as an educator, check out the video that they built. It's featured in YouTube. It's also on their own page, and I've linked it to my Google site here. And there is a video for students as well. Now, it's not necessarily built for English language learners, so the video quality may not be best for them, but it could be something you turn into an activity and help them decipher and decode and break down. So going back to the concern about using Flipgrid with ESL students, particularly students who may not have strong computer skills. In my spring class, the class I taught as we transitioned to COVID last April, I worked with students of all age levels, students that are from traditional college age, teens and early 20s, to students in their 50s and 60s and higher, older. I've worked with students in a variety of demographics, and I've seen that with proper scaffolding techniques, they can get these tools well. So what I mean by scaffolding is, first, we want to start with a low stakes activity. And going back to the demo page that I created, class project 3, you'll notice, has Flipgrid featured. But that's not this is the result of weeks and weeks and weeks of practice and practice and practice. So going back to the Google page here, having them do a homework activity for 0 points over the weekend, just to have them record, "Hi, my name is," helps break the ice. Do 2 or 3 of those before you even do anything for points, and then start to scaffold up to a higher stakes assignment. When I featured Flipgrid to some colleagues at the end of last spring, before the summer, I had a conversation with some folks who teach communication studies. Really cool conversation, really great input. They knew about Flipgrid as well as other video recording tools. I know someone just mentioned Canvas Studio in the chat box. I'll talk about that momentarily. And we had this interesting philosophical debate as to whether or not a recorded video is appropriate. Does it have enough academic rigor that we're looking for in our classes? That's certainly up for debate. So that is something to keep in mind. If you would maybe use these tools perhaps instead as a warm-up type of practice activity. So rather than having them do the high stakes project in Flipgrid, have them do it live through Zoom, but practice using Flipgrid ahead of time. Another good thing about Flipgrid, I think, whether it's used for high stakes assignments or not, it allows you to give feedback to students and allows the students to give feedback to each other. So you can go along the way and note certain points in the video where students maybe mispronounce something. Maybe students use the incorrect vocabulary word. It allows you to go in and just make notes along the way. So again, I don't have a lot of time to feature all those cool tools, but I will show you sort of what it looks like to the students, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit together. As I'm going into the Canvas page here, I want to note about Canvas Studio. Canvas Studio is it's new to me. My district recently purchased it, and I debated on whether or not to use that in this webinar. I just didn't feel comfortable enough, or at least at the expert level enough, I suppose I should say, to feature that today. So maybe in another webinar, we'll get into Canvas Studio. But basically, like Canvas Studio, Flipgrid allows you to record video activities. So here I am as a student back in that demo Canvas shell that I made for you today. And I'm in the module called Class Projects. And for the class project, the third class project, I always begin the module with the directions and requirements. Now, keep in mind, this project is really the final task from the book, Pathways Listening and Speaking 4. I just adapted it to my shell. So I took essentially what was already in the book and brought it into under my own parameters. So I have that final task prompt. Their job is to research information on a health and fitness technology product, and present it to the class. And I'm giving them their requirements, how much time, their outline, etc. And I go through this stuff, of course, with the students. Then I'm asking them specifically how to break down their project. What questions do they need to answer when they do their research? And this also helps them create their outline. As they answer these questions, they're sort of creating their outline. I've also linked a rubric here in Canvas so that they can see how their grade will come about. All right. Now I've clicked over here to Flipgrid and to the actual assignment in Canvas. You'll notice here it says CP3 Class Project 3, submit your video here. I have those same. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. We have a pretty good question for some basics. Yep. Someone was wondering if you could do a quick just explanation of what Flipgrid is or does for those that have not heard.
Just about to show you. Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you.
No problem. Great. Flipgrid, if you didn't catch that at the very beginning, it's a video recording tool. So it's a way for you to have students record presentations, whether it be a speech, maybe a conversation activity, any sort of, in this case, a demonstration of a product. The students are video recording from home or any device they have and sharing it with the class. So it's a neat way to do that. And let me show you what it looks like. So as the student goes into Canvas, I've already embedded Flipgrid here. They read the instructions again, and then they scroll down to the assignment itself. So what you're seeing at the bottom of the page is what Flipgrid looks like embedded to students. I've featured a little image here, which is a little jiffy of an Apple Watch. Again, their assignment is to feature a tech product. If this were my own real course, I would probably put a sample video here, a demo presentation, so that they get a sense of what I'm looking for in this presentation. And then when they're ready, they can click record a response. I'm going to stop my video and see if it'll let me record here, if it'll pick it up. Yay, it's working. Okay, so you'll notice that Flipgrid is now live, and so I can click here, record. Hey everybody, this is my Flipgrid video. I'm talking about the Apple Watch. Because I have a lot going on, my Wi-Fi probably isn't picking it up, but okay. I'm not sure if my camera is going to work for the rest of the presentation. Sometimes it goes in and out, and if it doesn't work, that's okay. Well, so Flipgrid, again, is a way for you to show video presentations to students. And it's also a way for you to allow the students to give feedback outside of class asynchronously. So that's the last little feature I'll show. Make sure I'm still sharing my screen here. Let me stop my share for a moment. See if I can get my webcam to work again. All right. Looks like, Joy, my camera's broken, but hopefully you guys can still see my screen. And as always, we run into technical difficulties, but we press on. The show.
Yep, we can see your screen.
Okay, cool. That's most important. So again, going back to that class project 3, as a teacher now, you're looking at the teacher mode. And as I click in, oops, let me go back to that page. As I click into the actual presentation, CP3 submit your video here, I'll be able to also link in and see the student submissions responses. So right now I have 0 responses, but you'll see them start ticking up. And I can go in and give my own video recorded responses there too. The last thing I'll show you is, this is a way I organize my students' feedback. So I've put students' names here, just first names. They find their name and then they go across the columns here and see which classmates they need to give feedback to. So what I'm asking them to do is give feedback to each other so that they have, you know, a little bit of commentary to learn from. It's peer review. It's not just, you know, my comments. They hear them from their classmates as well. So I want to pause for a moment because I want to feature 2 more things, but I know we might be running out of time. I know we're reaching close to our 1:45 mark. Before we take a moment to do our Jamboard, I want to feature our last tool, which is, what is a Jamboard, right, Stephanie? I'm going to get there. Just a second, I'll show you. In Zoom, there's a great feature called Breakout Rooms and Polls. You're probably already familiar with Breakout Rooms. Because we're currently using the webinar function for today in Zoom, we don't have the ability to use Breakout Rooms, but on this Google site that I featured for you, I've linked a explanation with a video on how you can use them, how to manage them, etc. So again, another resource for you here. But we did put together a poll. So in a moment, we will launch the poll, and that poll has a couple questions about the presentation today. So Joy, why don't you go ahead, let me go ahead and launch the poll. There it is. Joy has launched the poll. So you should be able to see the poll in front of you. And after we do the poll, I will talk a little bit more about Jamboards. While you're doing the poll, I can explain briefly what a Jamboard is. And we will, after the poll, conduct one. Jamboards were relatively new to me. I found out about these a few weeks ago as I was participating in a web conference myself. It's another Google tool. Basically, it's an app that Google bought and is now elevating to its other tools like YouTube and whatnot, Google Docs, etc. A Jamboard is a place for us to simply put Post-its. So it's a way for us to have a discussion activity online silently. All right. We'll get to those Jamboards in a second. The poll is going to be closing pretty soon here. We have 2 questions. The first question, before we get to that second question, sorry. The first question is, Joy, can we share the results of the first question individually? Yes, cool. So the first question is, what is the key to good instructional design? And that's right, 94% of you were paying attention. Less is more. Just like we noted, we want to keep things clear and concise and consistent. Joy, before we get to that second poll question, let me take a second to feature the Jamboard. So If you are with me here in the Google site, click on Jamboard, the one that's on page, the breakout page. In fact, I will click the link and share that same one with you. The question for us to jam on is, how do you facilitate group work? So whether that be a breakout session, whether that be something you do through Zoom, how do you facilitate breakout small group work? Now, as you're posting Jamboards, jams here, let me demonstrate for you. I like to use the post-it feature, the sticky note. So I just click on that sticky note and I type my answer here. And then I hit save and it posts like that. You do the same, take a moment to start posting some notes. You can also add images, whatever you'd like. All your tools are there on the left side. So start posting some notes and answer that question. How do you facilitate small group work? One thing I do before I launch a breakout room, I give the students clear directions beforehand. So before we get into the room, I ask the question, what is it that we're trying to do? In this case, how do you facilitate small group work? And then I'll demonstrate the activity to the students, and then we launch. So sort of as we're experiencing today, clicking through together, we can share ideas in a way that's organized. All right, so demonstrating once again the Google Jamboard. You have lots of tools here on the left side, a pen, you can kind of draw, an eraser, take that out. You have a pointer tool. And I think the most useful is the sticky note. So you can post in different things here. I like to use breakout rooms in Zoom.
Jacob, for them to be able to share, do you have to share it or open it somehow?
Is it not? I guess it maybe. Yes,
some people are saying they don't see the tools.
Okay, yeah, it should be shareable. So right now we have 97 people here. I think the free version limits people. So if you're getting a page that says it's closed, it's because too many people are posting right now. And that's probably one way. Let me see if I can. Usually in a class, however, we don't have more than, we don't have more than 25, 30 students, I would imagine. I just updated the permissions. So for those who are in here, maybe you can now edit and start posting. See if you can do that. So I use breakout rooms in Zoom. Oh, there we go. So I'm starting to see now it works. All right. I think that's what it was. My permissions were off. I was blocking it from you. Sorry, guys. Aha. So some folks are posting and I can drag these around, move them around. How do we use breakout rooms? Sticky notes are fun. It's just like we would use sticky notes in a classroom setting, right? And we can share these around. Let me post the Jamboard again. We can post these around the room, just like a gallery walk, sometimes we call those, but we're doing it virtually. So a participant saying, I like to use Google Docs, Google Slides. I agree. One of the features I use in my class, I typically in a reading class or listening and speaking class, I have an activity that deals with vocabulary called a personal dictionary. So the students usually keep a personal dictionary, a notebook throughout the semester. But in the time of COVID, I don't have time to go and drive to their house and pick up their notebook, for example. So how do we turn that to an online activity? I adapted my personal dictionary to our personal dictionary. And so the person who noted Google Docs, I just created a Google Doc, made a large spreadsheet basically with a column for the word, for the students can put in different words, the part of speech, the definition, maybe a translation, the source where they got the word, and then one final column for the student to put his or her name to note the entry. And then I would go through and it sort of becomes this crowdsourced list of vocabulary. It's really cool. So the students can use that as a resource, and then I can go through and give them credit based on their entries. So Google Docs are a great way to do crowdsource things too. Remember, we want to use technology for a purpose. So if it's about giving maybe feedback that's anonymous to a presentation and people don't feel comfortable maybe giving notes that may be too critical, we want to maybe use a Jamboard to allow people to do it anonymously. But at the same time, of course, we want to make sure that people are being respectful of each other and not posting things inappropriately. I can see Ava has raised her hand. Ava, if you want to maybe put your question in the chat box or the Q&A, we can get there.
Jacob, do you want me to read you some questions?
Yes, go ahead. And Joy, if we can also multitask and do our other poll too.
Sure. Let me put
So
that up.
in the last few minutes, we'll do our second poll here.
Okay, the poll is live.
All right, so go ahead.
One question is, will the teacher know when you're doing a quiz, for example, if students are taking pictures of or videos of the quiz?
Great question. Yeah, so test security is a real concern in the time of COVID. So a couple of things to keep in mind when we do testing. At the end of the day, we have to trust our students. Do we know if they're doing screenshots or taking pictures? I really don't know, to be honest. There are some platforms we can use to mitigate some of these concerns. For example, Respondus is a company that makes a lockdown browser. This browser is compatible with most learning management systems like D2L or Canvas or Blackboard. So what it does is once the assessment is launched in the browser, it locks it down so the student can't leave that page until the quiz or assessment is submitted. So that might be something your college may look into for test security. Other ways to really crack down on test security, making sure that the students are doing their work. I ask students to keep their cameras on during the test at least so I can monitor them. I also limit the amount of time. So if you go into the demo shell I created, you'll notice that I've limited their time for the quiz to 30 minutes. So they only have 30 minutes to answer those questions, and that gives them really less time for them to look around and Google stuff. The test will auto-submit if they don't complete in time. So definitely, I agree, it's a challenge for us to deal with test security during this time, but it is something we just sort of have to go along with.
Thanks, Jacob. And another question is, do you use breakout rooms for large online classes like 30 plus students? And if so, what are some tips for breakout room setup?
Yeah, great. And I apologize, I didn't mention this earlier, I should have. So I mentioned in terms of breakout rooms, you want to give your instructions for the activity before you do the breakout, before you let them into the rooms. I think I did mention that point. But one thing I didn't mention is it's important to organize those breakout rooms before class. So I know which students work well together. I know, which ones may be friends because I've seen them in the program for some time. I try to go in and manage my breakout rooms before class begins, or perhaps while they're doing some work at home, maybe a warm-up activity. I'm going in and organizing those breakout rooms before I launch them. So that way, I know that students can stay on task, and I know that they'll work well together. So manage your students well, like you would in class, and then explain the directions before launching the breakout rooms. Breakout rooms are also really great opportunities for you to take a quick break. Honestly, go get some water. I notice I do a lot more talking in the remote environment simply because we don't have the interactions that we used to have with students. So letting the students work together autonomously on their own in a small group goes a long way. So let me pause now to get our last poll. So the poll question that we had, the second poll question was, which student engagement tool are you most likely to use? Flipgrid, Zoom Breakout Rooms, Zoom Polls, Jamboards. So Zoom Breakout Rooms, it got the most. Looks like Zoom Polls would be the second. I like polls a lot. I use them sometimes on the spot. You can launch a poll right there in the moment, or like breakout rooms, you can organize them ahead of time. And it's a great way to organize and engage your students. So I'm going to leave the Jamboard now. Keep posting questions. We have about 5 to 7 minutes left in our presentation. I also made a final Jamboard here where you can post any questions offline. I'll come back and check them. And let me make sure that the sharing works here as well. I realize I blocked you guys, and I'll change that right now. We live and learn, right? I use the tried and true method of stumbling through things. I do have some formal training in instructional technology, but honestly, I don't consider myself an expert. I learn by doing, I learn by making mistakes, and I learn by watching people. So I encourage you to do the same. So I want to take a moment to thank you all for coming today. I hope you got something out of this presentation. If I talked too fast or went over things too quickly, remember, you can always come back to this Google site. I created it for you as a resource, as well as the remote ESL Canvas shell, a little snapshot into my own classes that you can take and work on yourself. So, okay, so Roger asked if that shell is in Commons. It is not currently in Commons, Roger, mostly because I just haven't put it there. I'd be happy to share it with you.
For anyone who's interested in the Canvas shells, please reach out to your sales rep. We will put the link to find your sales representative in the chat box.
And I'm seeing some notes about the Jamboard thing. I agree, Jamboards are cool. I've been in webinars myself, and I'm sure you have, where I've been put in a breakout room with people I don't know. And you know, while I think I'm a friendly guy, I don't necessarily, I can be a little shy around people I don't know. So this gives you an opportunity to engage with students quietly. It allows them to post things anonymously, to engage in conversation without sort of feeling pressured to be social, if that makes sense. It helps all, you know, learning styles and personality styles. So a couple more minutes here as we take additional questions. A lot of thank yous. No, thank you guys. Thank you all for coming, particularly to, I wanted to give a shout out to my old friend Jack Sadler from Broward College. I'm so glad you came today. And some of my former colleagues from Florida, any of my current colleagues here in the Los Angeles Community College District, hello. We had a great turnout today. Thank you. How do I access the sample Canvas shell, says Marilyn. Well, again, that is available through the Google site. So this Google site is something linked here. I'm showing it in my screen share. I'll copy it and paste it again into the page, into the chat box. So when you link into that, Marilyn, you can find it under additional resources, or if you click on breakdown, you'll find the link to the Canvas page there. And what that will do, it's a self-enrollment link. So that will help you self-enroll into the demo Canvas shell. And that allows you to see that page from the student perspective. Joy, we can take down the Zoom poll. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. Yeah, so again, that link will help you self-enroll and give you a sense of what class looks like designed for the student in mind. All right, thank you all so much for coming. I appreciate it. So how long will Canvas be available to for us to view, says Ava? Well, Canvas as a system, of course, is always going to be there, but this particular demo shell, I have no plans of taking it down, Ava. So it's really up to you as long as you need it. You are enrolled as a student, so there's not a whole lot you can take from there. But if you're interested in, for example, the Pathways on Canvas content, that's something you can contact your National Geographic Learning Cengage sales rep about. All right.
Thank you, Jacob.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Joy. I'll stop my screen share now. And
thank you.
Something.
I think we have answered all of the questions. So thank you so much. We are right on time, actually. So Jacob, thank you so much for your time. And thank you everyone for attending today. You will be receiving an email with the link to this presentation and a certificate within 5 to 6 business days. Thank you so much.
Thank you.